And I know, speak with a native, practice with as many natives as possible. Like, that's the advice that you hear everywhere on the internet, everywhere, for speaking a language. And while there is some truth to that, like, of course it's good to speak with native speakers, what we need to just keep in mind throughout this process is that not all native speakers are teachers, and not all native speakers have the same level of language, the same level of not even fluency, but the same level and knowledge of a language. And there's a reason that teachers go to school to be teachers, because not everyone can do that, or even just is curious, even wants to do it, right? Not everyone wants to be a teacher, and not all native speakers are teachers. So to just go up to a native speaker and be like, hey, teach me your language, like, there's a lot more to it than just knowing how to use the language. It's one thing to know how to use the language, and another entirely to be able to teach it. And even for English, for myself, like, yes, I'm an English teacher, but not really an English teacher for non-native speakers. Although I can do it, and I have done it, I don't have as much training in that area, and I'm technically qualified to do it according to the state of California, but I don't have like any of the globally recognized certificates, like the TOEFL or the whatever else there is, the Cambridge certifications, all of those. I don't have any of those. I have a California teaching credential in English that also embeds ESL or ELD, however you want to call it, English as a second language, or English language development for non-native speakers, because we have a lot of them. So even though I have that, I don't honestly feel like I'm all that qualified to do that right now, and I can do it. But in order to do it, what I have to do before each lesson, like when I have worked with people in the past doing that, it was a lot of work on my part to go through and review the lessons before teaching them, because I had to learn like how is English acquired as a non-native speaker. Because working with people from a like advanced to proficient, like accent reduction kind of thing, like that covered. That was kind of my thing. But that was because they're already speaking, they're already pretty fluent, just working on really developing and improving and perfecting, if you will, I guess. Never gonna be perfect, but improving, perfecting as much as you can. And that was okay, because that, like, native speakers can do that pretty decently, depending on their education and depending on just depending on their education, really. It can be formal education, it can be informal, it doesn't matter how you achieve it, but depending on how much you know about the language, right? How much you have been exposed to the language through reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so you can do that. But as far as like the beginning stages of a language, it's why like when you work with just a language partner, and it's good for conversation, like it's great if you just want to practice what you already know, but you really can't expect just some person who has never taught before to be able to teach you a language, because it really requires looking at the language from a foreign perspective, not a native perspective. When you learn a language as a native, it's just using it. You just pick it up, and it's a lot of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, which is great to do as a foreign language too. But when we learn a foreign language, especially when it's like, a little bit later on in life, like even when I'm later on, like basically just if you're not learning younger than 6 or 7, if you're like below then you kind of just pick it up. And although you can use some of those strategies as a foreign language learner, it's really tough to just do that. You need some of the grammar too, and you need the grammar too. And even in your native language, you need the grammar too. And you learn the grammar too in school or self-studying or however. But it's different, because when you learn a foreign language, you learn like verb conjugations, for example, like with Spanish or French. You learn verbs and then you learn all of the conjugations. And you don't necessarily learn it all that way in your native language. And I know I didn't. Like when I went to college and I was learning Spanish, and it's like, okay, Now I gotta learn not just Spanish, but I have to learn how to conjugate verbs. I have to learn what indirect and direct object pronouns are. I have to learn what the infinitive and gerunds and all of these words are and how they're used, and it's really the linguistics aspect. And so when you learn a foreign language that way, and when I have taught English as a foreign language that way, I had to really prepare for each of those lessons, because they'd ask like, okay, well, what is this verb in the past tense in this situation? And sometimes it's like, okay, well, I can tell you how to use it. Like, you can give me an example of something to say and I can tell you if it sounds correct or not, but I can't always tell you why it's correct or not correct. So with that, like, it's really a matter of fluency in that regard, because fluency is being able to use that language and just let it flow, you know? It's fluid, it's fluent. And when you were learning another language, it's not always that way. Like, sometimes it's more structural, it's more mathematical, and it's like, it's scientific, right? Linguistics is a scientific study of language, putting it together that way, and we can build it that way, right? We can build vocabulary and grammar and then start stacking on some grammar concepts and then start stacking on some other concepts, and then like reading and writing and speaking and listening, and then like weave it all together, and eventually we still get to fluency. It's just a different process. Either way, as a native, where you start with listening, the very first thing you do as a native is listen, because when you're, a baby, you don't speak, you just listen, and then you start speaking. And then you start reading, usually, before writing. You're listening and reading, someone reads to you. And then you start writing, and then you start integrating. And then you start learning grammar. Well, as a foreign speaker, a foreign language learner, you start with the grammar usually, the vocabulary, and then you add on those other factors, those other aspects there. You add on the reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and usually listening first. And actually, now that I think about it, like you have the vocabulary, and sometimes it even is a little bit of like the reading and writing first, because you're looking at those words and sound association, and it's a little different. It can be any combination of those. So there's quite a bit more flexibility. There's more variety in how you can do it as a non-native speaker. And that's really the beauty of it, actually, is that you can go at it from any angle, from vocabulary, from grammar, from complete immersion. Just start speaking like you do with your native, like listening first, of course, you have to listen first, but anywhere. And you add on to it, right? And you add that, and you build and you build and you build, and then you integrate in more reading, writing, speaking, and listening. But the foundation of a foreign language is vocabulary and grammar, typically. And whereas the native language, it's listening and speaking, and then reading and writing, and then the grammar on top. And it's still difficult. Like, either way, it's difficult. If you look at even just Americans, because I'm in California, and if you look at, how many people misuse like your and there, and, all of those words and like grammar aspects, a lot of people do, and it's difficult even for native speakers. So native speakers have their challenges as well, and foreign speakers, they have them too. They're just different. And that's why the native speakers tend to have like a more fluid speech, because it's more natural. Whereas the foreign speakers, they have that foundation of the grammar and the structure, and then they're adding on the like fluency aspect, I guess, if you will. And it's not that any one of those, either one of those, is better or worse than the other. They're just different processes. And whether you start at vocabulary and grammar, or you start at listening and speaking and reading and writing, and then you add on top of that vocabulary and grammar, or reading and writing and speaking and listening, you're still going to get to the same level eventually. It's just a different process going through there. And it's not even just those two. Like, those are the two main ones, or like the standard ones, I guess. But it's not that you have to choose one or the other. You get to do whatever works for you. You get to build on whatever you have and use what you have and any resources you have, anything. But it's important to have this conceptualize of what it means to be a foreign language learner and a native language learner, right? To have those different foundations and then to build on it, and just understanding that even though they're different processes, they use those same skills. They're just at different times, and you can just intertwine them. And then of course you can transfer back and forth between the two. Like as you develop your reading and writing skills in your native language, as you know, even at a low level, even as a kid, those transfer into your foreign language. And then as you develop those, like anything you develop that's new, it transfers back in, because we learn the skills, and the skills are used in any language, right? Reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We use them in all our languages. So it's not even a matter of like, okay, do I do this here and here and here and here, building two? It's more of like, there's two areas, right? There's a native and the foreign, and then there's just all the overlap in between. Anywhere you can intertwine them in between, that exists as well. So native speakers, yes, of course you want to speak with as many native speakers as possible to practice your language, but not all of them are credentialed teachers, of course, and not all of them understand language from a foreign language perspective as well, especially if they don't also speak a foreign language. You know, if they only speak a native language, if they only speak one language, how are they going to understand how foreign language works? And I know that from, at least from my experience with English, like before I learned Spanish, I had no idea how to teach English as a non-native language, like no idea at all. I had to learn it all. So it's not even like they can't do it, it's just, it's something that they have to learn as well. They have to learn how to teach as a foreign language, and it's not something that people just automatically have because they're a native speaker. So yeah, that is my take on foreign and native and speaking and all of that. And I hope you guys found this helpful. I really do. And let me know down below in the comments what else you would like to know on this topic, and just anything, any language discussions, they're all welcome down below. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys back here next time. Bye guys.